My mom didn't respond to it because she just thought it was, the cat. She couldn't imagine. She said it was incomprehensible for her to think that I was in the freezer. And I ultimately ended up I felt like I just was gone. And I didn't look back and see my body like a lot of people do. Um, I actually felt like I was at the bottom of a stairwell. And I remember looking up and thinking, I want to get to the top of that. And they said, we bless and block everything. You think you know what's best for you, Susie. We know what's best for you. What you try to control controls you, and what you run from will chase you on your journey.
I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of The Soul Inspired. Today we have Susan Grau with us. She's an intuitive medium. She's also a healer, an author, and many other things, a speaker as well. And we're going to be talking to her today about those experiences and also a near-death experience that she had. So I want to say thank you so much, Susan, for coming on today. I've been looking forward to this for a while, so thanks for
Well, I'm
coming
really
on.
happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
I usually start by asking, because I'm just meeting you for the first time now, and I look at the life of Susan, your entire life, and your situation, I believe, happened when you were a child. So when that happens, it's a little bit different because some people I talk to, they have this moment, say in their mid 20s, they have this experience, and before that, they have this life experience they had, and it kind of, they had a shaping of life, whether it's religious, family, all this stuff, and then this experience happens, and sometimes it completely shifts their entire life, right? It completely changes things up. I'm curious with you how much you can recall before your experience and what type of person little Susan was before the experience.
Well, I do recall being about 3.5 years old. And I see probably the only thing I really remember is when we had animals on our land, and when they would pass away, I'd see them floating. And I didn't think anything, to be honest. I mean, I guess I thought, I'm sad they're gone, but I mean, I didn't think, why are they floating? Because it was my normal to see that. And so that was probably my first memory of seeing something other than just, the regular world, I guess I want to say. For me, it was the regular world, but the regular world. Um, and I remember things happening, and we had religion when I was little, and I remember it. And I remember, going and Eucharist and all the other things that we did. And seeing my sister go through all of the stages of the church, and so I remember that stuff, but it's vague.
Mm.
Um, and then at 4.5, I was almost 5. I was just a couple months away from 5. I was pretty playful little girl, maybe a little bit shy, and I wanted kids to like me. I wanted to be loved. I was always an empath. I was born that way. I have family who has this gift, and they were born with it. And I didn't know about the gift, but I knew I wanted to fit in. So I was playing with some boys that were older, and they said, if you want to play with us, we're going to play fort. If you want to play fort, you have to get us popsicles.
Mm.
And of course, I'm going to do what my elders tell me, right? Because I want to fit in and I want to be part of. And I was a pretty tender little girl. So, I was shy and um, a little bit, just kind of went through the neighborhood, not really understanding, who I was. Of course, I was little itsy bitsy. And I climbed up in the freezer, and from there it just went. They closed the freezer door. It was unplugged, and I thought I was going to find popsicles, and they closed the freezer door and they closed the garage door, and they ran home and played, and then they went home. And I think for me, my first instinct was, we're going to have some fun, because I was little and I thought it would be a great time. And then the next thing was, this is not fun. And I heard that thud of that garage door. I grew up in a dysfunctional family, so when I was little, I had a father who was alcoholic and a mother who, was trying to deal with that. And so she wasn't really paying attention
Mm.
the way she should. And the way mothers do now, there's a lot of helicopter parenting now, which I
Mm.
find to be wonderful if, their kids need it now. And there should have been more then, but there wasn't. So I'd already had some life experience that most hadn't had, in our neighborhood, because I was already running around. Um, So when that happened, it was just like this overwhelming feeling of, um, I'm going to die. And I had seen things, transition. So I knew what it was. I just didn't understand what that meant. I knew that I would stop breathing. I just didn't understand the implication of that.
Mhm.
And I just remember screaming at the top of my lungs. And my mom said she heard the sound of a cat in heat. And it's a very, very high pitched sound. We had a lot of cats on our land. And that's the sound of terror. It's the highest pitched sound you can imagine. And it's horror.
Mm.
And I remember that sound and I'll never forget it. And I, you know, after a while, I saw three lights and they told me to stop screaming and I didn't. I was just a little itty bitty and I thought, no, I'm going to keep screaming. And my mom didn't respond to it because she just thought it was, the cat. She couldn't imagine. She said it was incomprehensible for her to think that I was in the freezer.
Right.
And she didn't listen to her instincts and she had pretty good instincts, but she didn't listen to them. And I remember seeing those three lights. And then I heard again, stop screaming. So that time I did. I listened because it felt pretty powerful to me. And I ultimately ended up I felt like I just was gone. And I didn't look back and see my body like a lot of people do. Um, I actually felt like I was at the bottom of a stairwell. And I remember looking up and thinking, I want to get to the top of that. And it was like, looking back just to describe it, because I couldn't describe it as a child. It was like a Greco-Roman room and it had pillars and an open ceiling. And I was looking at it and I was thinking, there's a circle inside this room and I want to know what's in that circle. And that was my thought. And then I was there at the edge of this, what I call the well. And, I studied for my doctorate under Raymond Moody. And he
Mm.
said to me while I was telling him the story, um, Raymond, do you think, why didn't I see the, uh, not the tunnel, oh, the tunnel. Yeah. And
Right.
he said, Susan, did you ever think the well was the tunnel?
Mm.
And that was like an aha moment for me because that wasn't that long ago. And I was in shock, but I guess it was the tunnel.
Mm.
But what I saw was what I would call now like one consciousness, DNA, moving through this tunnel or this well, and it was prayers. And I could hear people, and they were saying things like, my mom's got cancer, and please don't let her die, God. And I'm going to turn 16, and my dad won't let me have a car, God, please. And, tell him to give me a car, and just all these different things people were saying. And I knew somehow innately that it was people's prayers, but I didn't, because I knew what prayers were. And I called the lights my angels because they come as we understand them. And I understood what angels were. And I looked over at the angels and I said, do you answer all those? And I was just really curious. I didn't really understand where I was, but I knew I was safe. I didn't really consider that I had crossed. And they said, oh no, Susie, sometimes what people desire the most isn't good for them.
Mm.
I didn't like hearing it. That's what my mom would say to me, just because you want it doesn't mean it's good for you. And so I kind
Right.
of was a little annoyed and I could feel that. But ultimately, I saw a lot of things in that room that were really interesting, and it would take hours to tell you the whole story. But I ended up looking in front of me, and I saw this beautiful road. It was golden yellow, and I likened it to The Wizard of Oz, the Yellow Brick Road, because I had seen the movie,
Mhm.
and it felt like that's what it was. And at the front of the road were these beautiful pyramids that were shining gold and I could see pavers. And I was watching what I thought were humans going to this pyramid and pulling from the bottom of it. And I don't know how I knew, but I innately knew that was their life journey and that they were unbalancing it because I could see the pyramid tilting almost in a scary way, but I wasn't afraid. And I was watching these people pave a path with these bricks, these golden pavers. And I remember watching them drop to their knees and say, for the love of God, please help me. Nothing's working out. Everything's wrong. And I could see that the path was all crooked
Mm.
and out of place, and pavers were sitting on the side and there were holes. And it was really weird. And I watched, these angels come in And they started removing the pavers and putting them back to the bottom of this pyramid. And they would go to the top and they'd pull a paver and it would recreate, as though now looking back, our life journey is recreated over and over, hence infinite, right?
Right.
And I watched them start paving this beautiful path. And I said, "What are you doing?" And the people were gone. And they said, "We are the pavers, you are not. All you have to do is walk it." And I knew that they were putting in my head what to ask them. They had to be. And I said, "How do you know if you're walking it right?" And they said, "We bless and block everything. And make no mistake, you can get through a block battered and bruised at best, or you can shift. And if you see another wall or block, shift again and continue that until you see us paving your path. You think you know what's best for you, Susie. We know what's best for you. What you try to control controls you, and what you run from will chase you on your journey." And I've never forgot those words. They've become
Wow.
my words. I use them in all my quotes. And I flashed into another room. I kind of popped, but I didn't, like I don't remember popping, but it felt that way to me. And I was in this beautiful room where I watched, I would call today virtual books, but I know there wasn't anything like that. Just like there weren't garage door openers and cell phones and, things like that.
Right.
And I watched these beautiful tablets or books come in front of a group of people. And I knew they were a family, which gave me a lot of peace and safety feeling. And they were saying, "I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that." And I was hearing, "Well, I'm going to come in and do this when you do that." And I was literally in this room that was just this beautiful, it was floating. And I was watching them do this and I was hearing these angelic or beings or these guides, I think they were guides, um, saying to them, "Oh, no, 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 that's too much. That's too much to try to do.
Mm.
And you need to slow down here and think about this." And they said, "No, no, I know I can do it." And they said, "Well, you do have free will." And then they were gone. And then other people were coming in and I said, "Where am I?" And they said, "You're in the room of knowledge." Now, in the first room, when I asked, "Where am I?" they said, "This still blows my mind. And it really is heavy for me. I don't know why, but it always, I want to cry when I say it." But they told me, "You're in the room of heart's desires." That
Mm.
was my first room I was in. And that's what I was seeing in that well. And so when they told me I'm in the room of knowledge, I'm thinking, okay, so I'm in a different place totally. That's what I thought, but I wasn't. I was in one consciousness and I was experiencing it as that, but I didn't recognize that as a child. And they said, these people have free will, and they described free will to me and they explained what they were doing and they were going to their next incarnation. And I didn't know what the heck they were talking about.
Right.
I just kind of went, okay. Well, later on in life, somebody said to me, "Do you believe in reincarnation?" And I was like, "Oh my God, there's that word. There's
Mm.
that word." And then I understood it and it blew my mind, and that's how my life went. Like people would say things to me, and I was in a church and I was listening to the preacher, and my husband was going to be a priest. He went to seminary, and the preacher said, "And the paths were paved in gold." And I looked at my husband. I almost fell off my seat. And I said, "Did you hear that? Like, do you hear what they just said?" And I said, "That's the golden yellow brick road." And he goes, I said, "Did you know about this?" And he goes, "Well, yeah." And I think one of two things, he assumed I did. And I said, "Why didn't you tell me?" And he said, "Well, I just thought you knew or you'd figure it out." It
Right.
was like he
Yeah.
was shocked that I reacted that way. But anyway, I'm in this room, and then I kind of moved from there. There were other things that happened, and it was said to me it would take me so long, but I moved from there into this beautiful, I keep calling them rooms, but they're really not rooms. I don't know what else to call them, honestly. But it was an area, a place, and it was still one consciousness. It was all blended together, and there were animals and creatures. And I mean, like, I saw squirrel. I mean, I saw everything, every kind of animal. And I hadn't lost an animal that I loved or knew really well. I was too little to understand, that this was my cat that passed, it was just like the kittens died. So I didn't see anything. I saw kittens, but I didn't see anything that were mine. And so I didn't really know what I was looking at, but it was the room of companions, they told me. And there was this field. And I walked out into the field and I sat down. And I say I walked out, I think I just kind of was there, but it's how I experienced it. And I sat down in this like beautiful field of colors and flowers and like you've never seen ever. Like so vivid that literally the blades of grass were pulsating. It was that alive. Everything was alive. And I watched these animals romp and play. And I just started sharing this part of my story. So if I cry, I don't know if I will, but I haven't shared it on all my podcasts. I just started, because it's so precious to me. But I looked to my left and there was this mountain. And on the top of it, or somewhere on it, was this beautiful bean. And I knew I wanted to get up that mountain. I just wanted to be next to it. And instead of going up to it, I felt this ray come towards me, and it was like a light. And it was so vivid and so bright, and it was pure love. And I felt like I was perfect, and I was everything, and I was nothing. It was like, I can't describe the feeling, but I've never felt it since. Not like that.
Yeah.
And I just heard some things from this beautiful light that I've never shared, and I won't. They're they're precious to me, so deep. And then I was looking to my right and saw this cottage. It was like cobblestone, and it was colored like rainbows. That's why I call it cobblestone, but I think it was like rainbow light. And I watched this beautiful angelic being come floating out, and all I could think of was, I want to float. I hope I get to float. And I probably was, but I didn't know it. I'm sorry, I'm sniffling. And she said, it's time to go. And the next thing I knew, I was by this water. And she was walking me by this water. We were floating by this water. And she said, we all do life through the water, and water is cleansing for us. And I thought she meant she was going to clean me up because I had been in the field for my mom,
Right.
and I was going to see my mommy and I was going to get clean, but that's not what she meant. But that's how I took it. And she told me that I was going to have some difficulties on my journey, but that I would help people with that. And so she asked me if I wanted to see go back. And I kind of was like, I don't know what go back means. But no, I'm really happy here with this
Right.
love that I feel,
Right.
and this energy. And then she said, but you're going to see your mommy.
Mm.
And that was it for me. I
Yeah.
was ready. And she explained water to me. And later on, I understood that we were born into water, and, we were created in the womb in water, and it all started to make sense. And we cleanse through water, and we wash ourselves clean through water. And water is so important and so interesting because, clair, which is one of the things that I received, was a clair, which means clear. But in the English version of that, it means water and clear. Clear like water in the English version, not in the French version of clear. And I didn't know that until a while back. And I was in that other aha moment of, what? What? Are you serious? Like I read it and it shocked me. And my mom said she kept hearing your babies in the freezer. And I saw my mom when I was there. And I think it was my first experience of mediumship, actually, but I didn't know that. And I could see her. And she was standing in the back of our dining room that was connected to our living room. And I could see her in the corner. And it looked like to me that she was cleaning. So she might have been vacuuming or something. And I was talking to her, and I could see her move like she was feeling something, but I couldn't communicate. I couldn't get her to hear me. And I was telling her, I'm in the freezer, mommy,
Wow.
Come help me. And she said that she heard it so loud, and she didn't know how much time had gone by. She knew it was more than 20 minutes. And she said she heard it so loud that She couldn't deny it, and she thought, "This is preposterous, but I'm gonna go out." And when she went out, she opened up the garage door, but, later on, I always remember her telling me, but I always wonder, did she say it this way? But and just so in the, trying to be as clear and concise as I can, I think she was standing there looking at that garage door closed and thinking, "Susie can't lift this. She's not in there." Right? And
Right.
then she went, but I, compelled to open it and check. And she said she opened the freezer door and I was facing inward and she spun me around and I was ashen and my fingertips were blue and my toes were blue.
Mm.
And she started to scream and she ran to get a phone because there weren't cell phones. And I fell and she dropped me. She couldn't carry me to do it. So she was running and she dropped me and I cracked open my chin. And it
Mm.
was that bad of a crack. I mean, she put a butterfly on it. I still have the scar, so I don't know how bad it was, but it didn't seem bad to me. And I took a breath. And when I got well and felt better, which took some time, she butterflied it and, all that. And she thought I might have brain damage and she was really scared. I had an alcoholic father and she didn't want to tell him. She didn't turn it towards the wall and buckle it down. And but when I felt better, I opened my eyes and I could see people. They were everywhere. They were
Mm.
looking in my window, under the bed, and down the hallway. I was afraid to go potty. I was afraid to get out of bed. And I could just feel them and see them and hear them and sense them, but I didn't know what they were saying. Like it was mumbling to me. It's no longer mumbling, but it was then. And I would cover my head and say, "Go away, go away, go away." And they wouldn't go away. So that's the story of, being little and having this experience. And I can't tell you how it changed me because I don't really remember who I was before that, except that I know it created the ability for me to help others in grief. And I
Right.
knew that I was a little healer all of my life. Like I wanted to heal everything. I played doctor with the animals and I wanted everybody to be okay and I wanted to be loved. I wanted
Mm.
to find that love again, that feeling,
Mm.
and I never did. So I was very codependent and very needy for love. It's just love me. I'll do anything. Just love me. I'll let you do anything to me. Just love me. That was
Right.
my way of being. And so yeah,
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's incredible. And
it was.
it's
You know,
sorry, go ahead.
I just want to say this last thing. People ask me, how do you remember all that as a child? That seems a
Mm.
little. And I tell them, do you remember The Wizard of Oz? And
Mm.
everyone says yes. And I said, how old were you when you watched it? And they're like 5, 6. And I say, do you remember the yellow brick road? Yeah. Do you remember the golden or the red ruby slippers? Yeah. Do you remember what the witch looked like? Yeah. Do you remember riding the bike before Dorothy got knocked out? Yeah. Do
Yeah.
you remember the little lollipop kids going, yeah.
Mm.
I go, do you remember the good witch? Yeah. Oh, Glenda, yeah. And they look at me and they go, oh my God. I said, when something has that kind of impact on you and it's so alive, like the Wizard of Oz was created, it you don't forget it.
Right. I was
That's
gonna,
how I remember.
yeah, and I was gonna say, it's not that people mean to do this, but sometimes with near-death experiences or spiritual experiences, there's sometimes a way to almost look at it as if it was almost dreamlike. But from what I've gotten from most of the people I talk to, it's not. It's a different
Absolutely.
there's our life, there's this beingness, there's dreams, but that is separate. It's a different thing. The memories are more vivid than what you would get in a dream. And so it that could be where their question, how do you remember all this? Well, um,
It
this is
was not a dream.
right, right. Because if
And
it
it
was, I mean, think about how many people out there can remember a dream they had when they were 4. There might be one that was a repetitive dream that came up, but it's
um,
not as in like, and you were leaving out, I could tell you were leaving out a lot of detail as you were explaining what happened to you. That was a brief overview of what happened to
very
you.
brief.
And
Yeah.
yet you can say it in a way that it almost feels like you're experiencing it now. And I can feel it. I could feel I could feel a lot of what you were saying. And I was mentioning to you how profound it's been for me to talk to different people who've had experiences. And, what's becoming more interesting to me, and I'm sure the pioneer Raymond Moody would agree with what I'm saying, is when you start to see commonalities and you start to see, because I know our experiences can all be very different, but there are certain things that people will say that I have just spoke to someone else that said the exact same thing, and yet both people don't know anything about one another. You mentioned there's so many things I wanted to mention, so I got to be cautious of your
Oh,
time here
go.
and
Let's do
think
it.
about where I want to go with this. But you were 5 years old. So yeah, you've only lived, or 4 to 5, you were only living a short period of time, you know, so nothing really would have shaped you by this point, likely to give you this experience, even if you were in a religious organization or anything like that. It's hard by that point. So you're very young. And then after that, your experience more or less shaped the rest of your life it seems like that experience is what really brought you into who you were supposed to be and the things you were supposed to do in your life. That's what I'm getting from this. You mentioned I'm going to mention this before I forget. You mentioned a few things. I just spoke with an individual who had a near-death experience, and she had the same similarity with this electronic book place and reincarnation and picking and choosing this life. Okay. She literally said electronic. She said the almost exact same thing you said.
Virtual.
Um,
Yeah.
and she could see her past lives. I forget if she had said that she was being given an option that if she left, she could go do this other life, but she would be a different person and she would have to endure some different things in her life. But it was in this space that you mentioned. It feels familiar, feels similar. The same thing when you mentioned, and I'm thankful that you shared this part when you saw the mountain with the being. I've had people mention this space where they are and they look over and they see in the distance a mountain or a landscape of sorts, but then they know there's this being or beings or whatnot, and then they explain that it's a very powerful moment. There's this very powerful moment that's coming up, and one of the
Just
questions that,
hearing you say it, yeah,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
extremely powerful.
and when I'm told this a number of times, it's a little different. I mean, everyone's experience is a little bit different, but there are these moments that I've heard, and I go, why am I hearing this again? Again, these two people don't know each other. So when you thought of that light, when you seen this light, this person or this being, were you instantly there? Were they instantly there with you? Like, what do you remember the transition of how you came to be close to that person or that
I don't
being?
even think the being came close to me. It was the ray, the light, the
Okay.
love. It was like I'm sure it was the being. It had to be. I mean, I've never been asked this question, so I'm trying to reflect right now because it was all encompassing. It felt like real, but what didn't look real. It looked like light with particles of just this love. I, I don't know. I don't
Just
know
from
if the being came off and came to me or if it was just projecting out that love and energy, you know?
Were there moments in your experience such as that where had you crossed over, you believe you would have kind of got a better understanding of that? Like there was this idea of there is this thing over there and I feel it, but I know I can't be there yet. Like was there
Yeah.
that feeling that
So
came
the
over?
mountain was shaped like a pyramid, which is really strange that I saw so many things that were shaped that way. And there was I, I'm going to share this, and I don't know if I've ever shared this on a podcast before, but I'm going to share it. There was this crystal. I may have shared it once, but it was, I call it a crystal because it was sheer, but it was shaped like a pyramid, but it was sheer. And I saw movement in it, and it looked like bodies and faces. And I knew that they were loved ones that I didn't know because I hadn't had a huge loss and I knew it. And I wanted to reach into it and I tried and I couldn't. But I could see them almost like I was seeing through a mirror to them on the other side. And I knew innately, I knew that if I could get through it, I wasn't going to go back. I
Mm.
wasn't coming back. And it was like this wall. I don't know how to explain it, but it was a crystal shaped wall. And I could see it would be like you looking through a mirror or a sheer, and I'm doing this and moving,
Mhm, mhm,
and they're all together, but I couldn't get through it. And I think that is what you're talking about for me. That was the other side. And when people say something so interesting was said to me, because I said, why is it we all have like some differences? And somebody said to me, well, if you take 10 kids or adults even and go to Disneyland, everyone's going to perceive something different. They're going to explain it and describe it differently, but
mhm,
it's still Disneyland.
mhm.
One's going to notice this over here, and one's going to notice, the astronauts over there, and and it's all going to be different, but it's the same place.
Right.
And I went, wow, that makes total sense to me. You know, who said that to me was Anita Morjani.
Oh,
She's my
wow.
friend.
Yeah.
And she said that. And I was like, Anita, that's so profound because I
Mhm.
never really understood why there were some differences, but that makes sense to me. Like how I viewed it through a child's eyes would not be how an adult would view Disneyland,
Right.
right? They would
Right.
see different things and experience it differently and conceptualize it differently.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. And you're right.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to perceive something a little bit different. And that, but what fascinates me again is this, um, you just said something, the way you said the crystal with the glass um barrier of sorts, that where your loved ones were over there, because our loved ones really are over there and they're here, right? That's what I'm kind of discovering through this journey. And but you knew that if you were to touch them, if you were to be there with them where you were, then that's where you would be. And you no longer would have this connection to this realm, wherever you had come from. And what was interesting is when you were told you had to go back, I thought that was funny that it's like, go back to what? Like this, I'm perfectly fine with this experience. I'm doing my thing here. Like this is fine. And
It
that,
felt good.
yeah, it felt good. And it did it feel as real as this? Did it feel as
Oh,
real?
more, more, more. This feels like a dream. I don't understand this world. I never have. To
Hmm.
be honest with you, I don't understand the human condition. I understand it logically because I'm an intelligent being, but the soul level, I don't get it at all.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's like we're missing so much. And so this is like a dream or a space and time and I say time because there's no time there. I can't, if I were to put you in a room that had no night and dark, light and dark, there were no windows, even if there was light in the room and it was on 24/7. Um, After a while, you wouldn't know time. It just would be because there'd
Hmm.
be no clocks, no windows, no night and day. And that's how it is there. You just are. It just is. So there's no time. And I don't know how to describe that any other way.
Hmm.
So I I don't understand this journey as much as I understood that journey. I felt so alive.
Hmm.
I felt so safe, so alive, so loved, so perfect, so everything. And I don't feel that here.
Hmm.
I feel alive, but I don't feel that. That's like something it's not describable.
One of the things that just came to me recently with another guest was they were describing this feeling of ease. So when they passed, they just kind of left their body and they witnessed their body and just thought, okay, here I go. And there was this kind of like, off I go. Um, but it didn't feel bad. It didn't feel good. It just felt at ease. And I immediately had this intuitive feeling of, I always feel busy here. It doesn't, and this is why it's important through meditation and these things that I'm learning that people are saying, make sure we keep practicing. And again, I practice it through my music, but I think even people who don't do music or whatever to find that space, because that's the difference. Is I'm always like, I'm always, it's not that I'm not at ease, but there's always something happening. There's always something happening. And in this place, it was just beingness. It was just at ease. It was very
But it's not boring,
right.
you
And this
know?
is where it gets confusing. And I've had these questions come up because I've said it's the same sense where someone says, "Oh, I felt so great. I was in nothing." And I go,
Yeah, I
wait a
know,
second,
but you're
because
in hustle and bustle too because it's so alive. Like
Mhm,
you are every think of it this way, every cell in our body, think of it being alive, like really like in
mhm,
front of you. That's not boring, right? And
right.
every experience, whatever you touch, every experience feels and is alive. Like if I look at the mic, it would be alive, pulsating.
Mm.
Do, does that
It
I don't
does
know
make
how to
sense.
just
Yeah.
it's so hard to describe, but when I look at colors, it's like the light on my book. You know how I said I saw the three things, and I
Yes.
have on my front of my book, I showed you I have these three lights.
Hmm.
I asked them to make them brighter, and they made them as bright as they possibly could. And I looked at it and went, that's not even
Could I see
like,
that again?
no,
The lights. We haven't introduced the book yet, but I'd be interested to see it
I
again.
know.
So you
But see
have,
the three lights? Uh, uh,
right,
they added an extra one in the center, but because they needed more brightness, but there
right.
was like that was the mountain kind of for me.
Okay.
But it's geometric, but that's nothing.
Mm,
It's like if it came out of the book and went,
right. It's a different form, right, than what we're
yeah,
used to. And the one of the I just find it so fascinating when I'm talking to people who've had these experiences, because it's so difficult in the human language to explain some of the
mhm,
things that are seen. And it's not that, you know, we can't explain it, because I think everybody tries their very best, but
there's no words.
I can sometimes see the frustration because there's not words. And I have a question for you, because you brought something up, and I'd love to see if what your interpretation of this is, if that's okay.
Ah,
It's
absolutely.
I've spoke with and I want to talk about your book as well in a moment, because that's interesting too. I've spoke with some different experiencers where we've talked about, what they love about why would we want to, come here, these kind of things, and we'll talk about that later as well. But one of the things that someone had mentioned was that if we want experiencing going into water, for instance, we dive into some water and we can feel the water on our skin. And from what I got from the interview, and maybe this person hadn't completely crossed, and from what I remember, this person hadn't had a complete NDE, from what I understand, but they figured that we can't feel that over there. So we wanted to experience that here. Do you do you buy that? Because I only say that, and I'm not trying to say that person was wrong in their interpretation, but I don't believe they actually crossed from what I'm remembering. They had a really deep experience, some very deep experiences, but there wasn't an actual, from what we know, a clinical death. And I'm curious if you think we have
Oh,
our senses over there the same way we have them here.
no, we don't because we don't have a body.
Okay. Okay.
So, so here's the thing. This is how I describe it. So it's interesting that you say it with water. So when I do my podcast or I try to describe it, we are here for the experiential. And we don't have bodies over there like we do here. It's like a hologram and it's sheer. And it's not a body, even though it can look like that if we want it to, but it's not. And we are there and we know everything there is to know about the ocean, every detail,
Mm,
right? Because we know all. And there is water there, but this is just a description. And in order to really know the ocean, you got to put your feet in the sand. You got to taste the salt water. You got to be pushed by the waves. You got to feel the water washing over your body. You have to feel the experience to really know it, know it. Like
mm,
if you graduate as a heart surgeon and you've never touched a heart, you're not really a heart surgeon, are you? Like you haven't had the experience yet. You're just a person who studied it. And so you understand it there, but you haven't had the full experience in body form. You are a soul form. And so you come here and then you get to have, you get to feel love and marriage and having a child and making love and food, and it's going down your throat, and a margarita dripping down, and just all of these experiences, and the mountains and what the dirt feels like, and all of that comes through a physical form. So we come here to be experiential. And when we experience something fully, our soul expands, because our soul is perfection. There is never a wound to our soul. It feels the wound, but it never becomes wounded. It is the vine to the divine, and it is created to help you heal anything and everything that you ever go through. So if our soul could be wounded or harmed coming here, there would be nowhere to go, because my soul would be wounded, your soul would be wounded. So what would we do to heal?
Right.
There'd be nothing. Our brains are wounded, obviously, and our hearts get wounded, and our spirit, which is the breath of life for me,
Mm.
gets wounded. But our souls are perfect. And so our souls want to experience imperfection and know what it feels like to like get bounced in a wave, and
Hmm.
what it feels like to like be alive and feel a little cut, or we don't want to go through a lot of trauma, but we do choose it because pain is our greatest motivator for change. And it is our greatest teacher. We have, I think, joy and positive, happy things and pain and dark things are equal in value. They both teach us something. And in fact, the darkest things I've ever been through, which is quite extensive, honestly, has taught me the most.
Mm.
So, I have two brothers and a mother who died by suicide, and I had things happen to me as a child that should not happen to a child by adults, and I've had a lot of experiences that I could go into that caused great harm to my heart or my brain or my body, but didn't harm my soul.
Hmm.
And I learned so much. And not only did I learn from it, but I learned how to help others with it. So
Yeah.
when someone comes to me and they have suicide in their families, I understand, and I can help guide them. So every experience has an experience behind it, and that experience is to help others experience and get through their experience. If that
Hmm.
makes sense. We can't know what we don't know.
Right.
We can't. And what
Yeah.
we know, we can't not know. So hear that. So we can't know what we don't know, but once we know, we can't not know. And that goes with us. So our heart has 40,000 neurons, and it's the mini brain. And the heart is what goes where our soul seats. And those are the memories that we need when we get there to help us grow and share with our highest selves what we need to learn. It carries those memories. And that's why reincarnation has effect on us. Have you ever been somewhere and gone, I've been here before, I know I have.
Yes.
That's soul knowledge.
Hmm.
That's the heart knowledge, the wisdom that goes with us, those neurons, that little mini brain, that goes with us. And it comes back into our next incarnation. And it comes back so that we have a continuum. But if
Hmm.
we remembered everything, we would do it differently. We would change our choices. And we are here for free will choices. So therefore, we can't carry all that memory. So, but it's there. And all of a
Right.
sudden we go, I could tap into that knowledge. I understand that, right? It just comes to us, but that's because it's with us,
Yeah. And
but
it
it's not
seems
up here.
And it seems like I'm looking into some of the things you do as well, because you work with people, but I believe you said you do past life regression too, or you
I
have
do.
done hypnosis. So,
I'm a
and
licensed hypnotherapist.
see, and that's amazing too, because you can then go back and work from past lives and see how it's affecting your current life. That to me is fascinating. We can speak on that, but I did want to say what I got from what you said, which is really neat from the question I asked about the water, is that we are part of God, right? So we are creators. We're creating, and then we're experiencing what we created. We're wanting to experience the creation. That's amazing,
So
right?
that
I
we
mean,
know the knowing is in our soul. It is not in our
mm,
body and our brain. See, our brain goes, I know that, but our soul experiences it. And we have a pure, true knowing when we come here.
mhm,
It's not just an understanding.
Wow.
So the power of that is just phenomenal when you think about it.
When you work with people who have had, so because I also have people who come on and we talk about trauma. We talk about healing through trauma and the things we can do. And I mean, I look at Anita's story, or anyone who's had, you know, gotten to a situation in their life where they're at a very, maybe they're very ill, or there's all these different things, and they heal in a way that's miraculous. Are we are we working with our soul at that point? Is that how we're clearing things? Because when you see these, oh, she was a miracle, or he was a miracle, and it's just a, because I hear this a lot. If all these ailments we have, and we can work through them because it's coming from our energy. It's not coming from the physical. Some of us are so stuck on the physical, but there's so much more going on. Is that the type of work that you work with as well?
Yeah, yeah. And so, I tell my clients, if you take a leaf and put it in your hand, it's just a leaf. It's beautiful, but it's just a leaf. But if you hold it up to the light, it's got veins, and those veins are its lifeblood. That's your soul and the spirit world connected.
Mm,
They're the veins, and they are a vine to that soul source. And that's where you heal. That's where the healing is. So in every experience I've ever had, whether it be physical, because I've had both, or emotional, it's not a lot of people that can go through the traumas I've had and feel whole. It's
hmm
very painful things, right? And be loving still and kind and move through the journey and appreciate the journey. But my soul taught me how to do that. So when you can step into your soul source, which is where I lead people in trauma, that soul source is your power force because that comes from the divine and it doesn't have damage. And if you think
hmm
about there's nothing on us that isn't damaged physically. I mean, we get age, we break, we get our nails break. Everything on us has some damage. We've got crevices and creases and, old age marks and scars and, but the soul doesn't have that.
Right.
The soul is pure and fresh and new and old and all of it in one. And it is your teacher.
Mm,
And it is your growth and it is your expansion of awareness and your clarity. So when I say I can't do this anymore, because there's times where I feel that way. I
mm,
won't pretend I'm like, I'm a human having a human experience. And there are times where I just don't want to do this anymore. I can't stand this pain I'm feeling. I know that my soul will heal it. It may
mm,
take 24 hours, it may take 24 months, it may take
right.
24 years, but my soul will heal it. And I'll come out stronger. And I always do. First, when something takes me to my knees, like the loss of my mother that way, after having, two brothers and two really good friends do that, it was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. But I felt my soul connect to the divine and pick me up. And I felt love penetrate me like nothing I've ever felt. And I knew I'm going to heal this. I'm going to get through it. That doesn't mean I don't cry. It doesn't mean I don't miss her. It doesn't mean I don't feel it. It just means that I've healed it.
Hmm
And, grief is a monster, all its own. And we need help healing it. But we do have that source to go to where we know there's something more. Nobody can tell me that is walking this planet that we can't figure out that there's something more than just this,
Right.
you
There's
know?
always this, a lot of people feel there's this something, right? And some people dig into it, other people fight it.
They're
And
not meant to.
and that's exactly, see, that's the newest concept that I've come to terms with, is that there are, I think, just sometimes we're not meant to. I mean, it just depends on what path we're on, right?
Right.
And
We're all at
it's,
a different soul level
yeah.
of growth.
What do you suggest to people then? I'm gonna say it like this because there's a lot of people that'll be listening to this over time, and they're they're looking at you and they're saying, here's someone who had, a brush with death at 4 years old, 5 years old. So majority of your life, you had experienced something that maybe some of us would never have experienced. And I don't think most people want a near-death experience, but it may have shaped those traumatic moments a little different for you. understanding where you truly came from? Possibly. As you mentioned, I will say this, as you mentioned, there were times in your life that came up and it brought back that memory. Oh, I remember this. Oh, I remember this, right? What I'm saying is some of us may not have that, and we may not be able to look back and say, oh, yeah, I had that experience. Maybe it shapes our belief system easier. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is how can someone heal in that same way if they're dealing with severe trauma? Is it working with someone like yourself? Is it working on themselves through meditation? I guess I'm just wondering what your
All of
insight
it.
is on
But,
that. Yeah.
I really believe that every trauma we go through, and trauma is grief, right? At the end of the day. And we have to grieve it and experience it. But we've been grieving since we hit this planet. When we came out of the womb, we start crying and grieving. I'm not my mommy's, little comfy room. And then they start prodding us and poking us. And then we get wrapped in a blanket of love and we get handed to our moms and we feel safe. That's what dying's like, by the way. We
Mm,
fight it, we're scared. And then we get there and we get wrapped in a blanket of love and everything is good. But as we go through the journey, so a child, think of a child, you take their bee away, their blanket, and they grieve. And you take their bottle away and they grieve. And then you take their diaper away and they grieve. And I could go through all the way up to the smallest of things. If I have a favorite pencil, my husband gave it to me. I lost it. I went through all the grief process. I started with denial. I know it's here. I'm going to find it. Right. And then
right.
I went to the anger. What the heck's wrong with me that I would lose something so special with my name on it that my husband gave me? Then I went to bargaining. I'm going to find it. I know I'm going to find it. It's going to be here. And then I went back to anger and I kept doing that until I got into acceptance. And that was, I'm not going to find it. I might need to deal with that and
Right.
go through that end to end grief process. Grief is something we understand and know already, but we don't recognize that because the big griefs throw us into turmoil. And when I talk with people, they say, I don't know how to do this. And I say, oh, but you do. So let's talk about the other areas in your life where you've grieved so that you can call upon a memory that tells you, I can survive because I've grieved so much. And it may not be the grief that's this big, but you know that you know the story, you know the drill.
Hmm.
So everything as, a human experience, even for me. I'm having a human experience. So, yes, I can say there's an afterlife, but I don't want to die.
Right.
I'm afraid of how I'll die. I'm not afraid of the afterlife, but I am. And even if I was wrong and there isn't an afterlife, which I know there is, but even if I didn't believe it, it wouldn't really matter then, would it? Because I wouldn't have anything. I would be just gone. So I wouldn't
Right.
remember anything anyway.
Right.
Or I would be in the afterlife going, whoa, I didn't believe it. And here I am.
Right.
One way or the other,
Right.
it's not going to harm us. But
Okay.
we see it as a harm or a fear, and it doesn't need to be. So, in my experiences, I haven't really gone back to, I think knowing, the way that my family died, that I knew they weren't being punished, but my soul knew that anyway.
Hmm.
But knowing, having seen that, I know that people who, no matter how they die, and it's just a transition, they're not punished there, they're loved. So, yeah, that helped.
Hmm.
But I didn't really tap into that because I'm having a human experience and I'm having a human emotion of loss. So I wasn't going, well, I know they're safe. I was going, oh my God, how could they do that? And I was in all the pain everybody else is in. And I couldn't just tap into them. I was so afraid when my mother tried to come to me, I was like, no, 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 no. I can't handle it. I couldn't handle the pain. So I
Mm.
didn't get to talk to my mom for 5 years. So I wasn't sitting back going, oh, I'll talk to my mom and I'll be okay. It wasn't like that.
Right.
So I went through the same experience that you do and everyone else does because I'm meant to. I'm having a human experience.
Hmm.
So for
That's
me, it didn't change it. It just brought me maybe just at the end of the experience, I went, okay, they're not suffering. They're
mhm.
not being punished. As I got through the experience, I came to that peace place probably easier than others might.
Right. Right. Because you've had this experience that shaped a little bit more of your beliefs. because some people just their beliefs. And I know you said, whether, and I like how you said it, if you pass and there's nothing, well, you're not, it's nothing anyways. So there's no point. But, a lot of us hold on to our individuality, our ego. I want to exist longer. And these are these things that come up. But what I found really interesting is your mother heard you, and she didn't hear you when you're in the freezer. She heard you from somewhere else, right? Like an internal feeling. I remember you saying that. It was like this like a loud, I'm in the freezer, kind of thing. I believe
Mhm.
you said that, right? And so
Yes.
that was her intuitive um, nudge to go look at what's going on. And so I guess what I'm trying to get at is if someone has an experience, a spiritual experience, a near-death experience, I guess it can shape maybe their at least the belief system that if they have a loved one that's gone, that if you've experienced something beautiful like you did, then there's a little reassurance that they're okay. And some people don't have that. They,
Tap into your soul. You
hmm
do because it's had it many times. It's getting rid of your limiting beliefs and recognizing that there's more to this than this because my soul feels everything. There's more. And yes, maybe it's not the picture of beauty, but I still believe that people know there's more.
yeah,
So I understand where you're going, and
yeah,
I agree with you. I
mhm,
understand what you're saying, but I want to encourage people that because they haven't had an experience like that, and I certainly don't think anyone should try to have one. I want to say that.
right,
Um, but because they haven't had it, doesn't mean they can't tap into that knowing. We
mhm,
all have that knowing. What gets in the way of that, I have in my book, I talk about fear versus intuition and how we can tell the difference. And it's, we have this intuitive knowing. And when we don't let our fear, and fear is ego, by the way, get in the way, we recognize there's got to be something more to this. And I'm more than just this body. Like I have a heart, I feel, and I witness and I experience, and I there's more than just this body that's
mhm,
going on inside of me.
mhm,
It's like when somebody else has a loss, it's not my body that reacts. I mean, I can start shaking and be sad for him, but it's my soul that
mhm,
is going, oh my God, there's more to me than just this body.
mhm. Yeah.
And that's the real power.
I think it's the understanding of knowing who we are.
Mm.
Who am I? Am I my body? I'm not my body. I'm who I am. And, I think it's really getting in touch with that. And I think that's why, I keep going back to this idea of meditation and being still with yourself. In a world that is so busy and so easy to be distracted, would be the word. I would say distraction is probably one of our worst enemies. You got to be able to step away from the distraction. So that's why I was just checking. I wanted to bring it up. Just sometimes I see comments where it's, well, it's nice that you know, and I try to encourage, yeah, nobody wants to have that experience. You do not want a near-death experience. And the beautiful things, this is why it's beautiful to have these type of conversations. And that's why I love Soul Inspired, because I can bring people like yourself on and we can talk about your experience and people can experience through you and
What all
understand
they
through you.
have to know. So as I was saying, if someone dies and you feel, that's more than a body. That's all they have to know. There's more to you than
Mhm.
flesh and bone. And thank God, because we would be robots here.
Right.
And that's what you tap into is the more. I don't always go, I'm absolute. I'm absolute. I don't do that. I know there's people that do, but I was a little girl. And sometimes
Mm.
I think, was I right? And I get fearful, but I know in my soul, and we all do. It's just a
Mhm.
matter of allowing ourselves to step into that. And that's not easy. It's simple to say, but it's not easy. And I know that.
Did it take you? a long period of time through your adult life to start getting into the work you're doing now? Because now I understand you've written books or a book. I don't know how many books you've written, but you write, you help people. Did it take a while for you to get there? Or when did that start to happen? Was that,
Oh, absolutely. I'm a grief and addiction specialist, and I started that when I was about 21 years old. So I
okay.
went to college and, did all that good stuff. And so I was doing that and working with a lot of addiction, a lot of running from our souls, right? Trying to get out of ourselves because we're in so much pain. And I just knew things about their loved ones that had crossed or about
Mm,
their intuition, their experience. And so I started having friends and stuff come to me and go, tell me about this, or I just had a loss. I want to talk to them. Can you tell me the last thing we talked about, or whatever? Because I'm an evidential medium and I like evidence. Evidence is important to me,
mm,
and evidence of their existence, meaning. And so, that started happening. And then somebody would come to me and I'd say, I think your PTSD has to do with the fact that you tried to revive your grandmother when you were 3 or 4 years old and you couldn't. You were jumping on her and she wasn't waking up. And they go, I didn't tell you that.
mm.
And I kind of look at them and you have to remember when I was young, there wasn't internet to look things up. There was
Right.
encyclopedias if we were lucky. We didn't even have those till I was older, I don't think. I don't think they existed. But so when I would say those things and people would say, how could you know that? And I'd think, how did I know that?
Yeah.
And I would start to backtrack because I thought they'd lock me up.
Right.
I thought they'd take my license away because they locked my mother up.
Mm,
That's part of why she didn't respond to her intuitive hits because she was medicated.
wow.
She had been put away, and that's what ended up happening.
That makes you wonder how, going back in time, and I've said this is one of the things I've said, that I'm so happy we live in a time now where we can share these things, because 50, 100 years ago, there's no way this conversation would have happened. It
Right.
just wouldn't have been allowed. And it's terrible, but at least now we're in a situation where, with all the things that go on in the world, you look at this part of it and it's like we're waking up. There's this almost duality happening. There's two things happening at once, which is coincidental. I don't know. I don't think so. And we're waking up and we're seeing things in a different lens, perspective, much like
Yes.
you're seeing different experiences in the afterlife type thing. So you were already working in this, and then as you got older, you got into the more spiritual realm of it, doing hypnosis, doing intuitive mediumship, working with people. Okay.
I
And
think the
when
last 25 years has been life changing. And the last probably 15 to 20, I've really like sunk into it. I was afraid. When you tell somebody you're a medium, what's the first reaction? Either you're the devil and you're doing the devil's work, or they roll their eyes and go, uh-huh, okay, right. Right.
right,
And so
right.
I would always say I'm a therapist, and then ultimately what happened was Facebook came out and I wrote to my friends and family, I'm a medium and I see dead people. And if you don't want to be my friend and you don't want to be my family, I understand. Just, disconnect from me here, block me, whatever you have to do. And when I pressed that button, I started sobbing for relief. And then nobody left me. And I said, what? Why? And they said, didn't you think we knew something was different?
Mm,
Didn't you know we knew? Or I had an inkling here
right.
that something was different about you.
So they were
And I was
seeing.
shocked.
Hmm.
Yeah. All the kids I grew up with would say, when I saw them in older years, they'd say to me, we always knew something was different about you. So I would tease you and bullied you, and I was bullied. And that's why. And we're so sorry, but we knew like something was different. Like we were having fun playing and you were talking to things, you know?
Right.
And
Right.
I'd go, oh, okay, I understand now. I was weird to them.
Right, right.
But
You're
for
seeing the
me,
dead
it was,
animal souls leaving, and they're having
yeah,
conversations. Yeah, because when you said that, that was fascinating that you had so young seen these animals and the crossing of the animals passing. Like that's
I didn't
fascinating.
know that's what I
And you
was
don't know
seeing.
that's different. It's the same thing. I always bring this up, and I hate to repeat myself for my audience, but I would close my eyes as a kid and I would tell my mom I'd say I see, and I'd say family members, and I'd see colors around them, and I'd explain the colors and what they meant, or why am I seeing these colors? And I was 5, 6, 7. I was pretty young, and she was picking up that something was a little bit different. I didn't know, but she's thinking, well, I don't think this is a normal thing, and she'd be reading these books
Something
and
wrong with his eyes.
yeah, I think you have a gift, Joe, and she was very kind about it and very good about it. It was when I started telling my friends. It was when I started telling people I knew. They kind of were like, I don't do that before bed. What are you talking about? And then I'd be like, oh, okay, well, something's not right. I shouldn't be seeing colors around people. So I don't know what all that was, and I'm starting to learn that
That's
it
your empathic energy.
right. And
You
but I
know,
didn't,
you're
I
an
didn't,
empath.
yeah, but I didn't embrace it because as a young kid, because I thought it was awkward. It was weird, or it wasn't normal to talk about that. So I can understand for anybody out there that has any kind of feelings of being a little different that way and how they can be treated.
Mm.
Um, so
My sister could feel medical things,
oh wow.
the emotion behind a medical injury or something medical. And she actually worked doing that for quite a while, where she could tap into what it was emotionally that was creating the illness. And she saw people in our room too, looking in the windows and under the bed. I mean, she had this, and my brother had it.
Mm,
And actually, unfortunately, it was so powerful in him that he developed schizophrenia and, and then ended up ending his life. But so it ran in my family.
mm,
It wasn't new to anyone, but it was because none of us knew what it was that ran in the family. Nobody was talking, you know,
right, right.
and because I think it's your abnormally normal life. And so for me, it was just normal.
Hmm.
And I didn't understand other people that couldn't, like if I'd say like your grandma wants to play with us and they go, that's so mean. My grandma died. And I go, I know she wants to play with us. And they look at me like I was a nutcase. And
Right.
they stopped playing with me and their parents would tell them to stop playing with me. And so
Yes.
it was like
Yeah.
that for me a lot of my life,
Yeah. Well, I've
but I
known
didn't know.
people who have the gift of seeing things, and they would have friends that they would mention things, and those friends would be like, don't talk to me ever again. And they didn't know how to handle it. It'd be like, oh, your mother showed me, something, and it would be accurate. And then the friend would say, I don't want anything to do with you. I don't know how do you know that? But so some people don't know how to handle it, right? So
Mhm.
it is,
They'll ask me things like, do you believe in Jesus? They'll ask me those things.
mm-hmm,
And I ask them, are you afraid? Does it give you fear? What's going on? And they'll say to me, well, the Bible says this and this, and that's why I got called evil. And I said, well, I always refer them to Corinthians 1 through 11, because it talks about the gifts that we receive, because I have my doctorate in divinity. And
mm,
it talks about my brothers and sisters, I give you these gifts, the gift of sight, the gift of knowing, the gift of tongue. And it comes from one God and one source. I don't care what you call that source. There's a source.
right.
And so, when people start learning that and they start looking that up and they start seeing that, they go, wow, I didn't even know that was in there. And this actually says it,
Right.
pretty much verbatim, the gift of knowing, the gift of prophecy.
Mm,
And it says all of this. And yet we fight it. And I'm not thumping the Bible here because I'm not I don't know. It's not my where I go to spirituality. But the point is that we're not evil and we're not anything to be afraid of. We just have this area of our brain that we have opened that maybe others haven't opened. That's all it is. It's an area in us
mhm,
that taps into this other area. We're not bad because of it. And we don't understand it. And we don't, try. It just is. At
yeah.
least for me, it just is. And so, when people would attack me and call me evil and things like that, I was like in shock because
Mhm,
I'm the furthest thing. I'm like night and day. I'm so filled with love and light and want to help people. And, I have all goodness in me. And in fact, too much because I get hurt so easily.
mhm,
And so, people would say, oh, you're so sensitive. And I'd say, I am a sensitive. You're
mhm.
accurate.
Yeah.
And they'd look at me weird, like, what does that mean? I am a sensitive. I stopped allowing that, people to say those things to me because it wasn't accurate.
Mhm,
I was born a sensitive. That is part of the description of me. It is not outside of me, it is an extension of me. And
I
when I
like that.
recognized that, it felt empowering.
Because I can relate to that. I can relate to that.
Yeah,
I'm
I know
also
you can.
sensitive. Yeah, yeah. I was the little guy, hiding behind my mom's back first day of school with rashes and very sensitive to everything. I mean, sensitive to, and I don't mean just in the physical. I mean everything. And I've had to learn to. I don't know if I think I'm still learning. I think I'm still in the learning process of that, of how to not allow that to bring my energy down.
I
Um,
think it's going to the place of being so filled with gratitude that you are a sensitive because it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to be. And when we recognize the beauty of that and that the spirit will give you this beautiful kindness and this goodness, and that doesn't mean your brain doesn't get mad and screw up. You have a brain, but in your soul, there's so much goodness and kindness that you're allowed to experience. So everyone has it in their soul, but you actually are allowed to have been given the gift of being able to experience it. That
mhm.
is just amazing. I would never want to be like the bully. I
Right.
know their soul is good, but they don't have the gift of experiencing the beauty of their soul. I'm so grateful. Even
Wow.
though sometimes it's hard, I'm still
hmm
filled with gratitude because
hmm
the opposite, the alternative is not caring, is not feeling. I don't want that.
Wow. I really needed to hear that today. And for all the sensitives out there, hopefully
Yes,
you
right.
take the strength of it because I needed to hear that. Thank you so much for going through everything. Your book, can I get the name of the book? And is the book around your experience itself, or is it about the work that you do, or is it everything? I'm just
It's
curious a little.
everything. I
Okay.
talk about fear versus intuition. I talk about the spirit world. I talk about my experience. I talk about the pure love of the spirit. I talk about how to connect. There are living among the dead, I call it, the
Mm.
seemingly dead. It talks about everything. It is so powerful, this book, that people send me. This is, I'm very fortunate because it's my first book and Hay House bought it right away. It's a gift from the spirit world, absolutely. But so I know they wrote it because I'm just not that smart. But it is so beautiful, and I have people write me and send me. Literally, I got a video from someone who said, "Susan, I this book changed my life.
Mm.
It changed me. I talk all about different types of grief, and anticipatory grief, where someone's going to die because they're ill, and then murders, and just all the different ways we grieve, and how they're different, and how not to measure love because it's not measurable, and how not to measure grief because it's not measurable. If someone can show me how to measure the two of those, I'm here to listen. And what we do to people is say, well, I love them more, so my grief is worse. We can't measure that. There's no measurement in our soul for that. So, it's learning to have that compassion. The book is so amazing. It truly is. I'm shocked by it. I
Oh,
am
wow.
shocked by it. So I suggest, for the 1995 it is, to get the book, because it's going to help you so much on your journey, and you're going to understand why you're an empath and how you became one. Your soul got that gift, and what to do with it and how to manage and live through it. And it's just got so much.
What was the
I
name of that
can't,
book again? Can we see the cover of that
yes, it
again?
is Infinite Life, Infinite Lessons, and it's wisdom from the spirit world on living, dying, and the in between.
And you can get that on Amazon,
You can get
Barnes
it
and
anywhere
Noble.
books are
Yeah.
sold. It's
Wow.
published by Hay House.
It's just the look of it too is so beautiful. It's just a
Oh, I
nice,
know.
like the colors, everything is just, yeah, you should be really proud of that.
Yeah.
That's really nice.
And I
Um,
wanted to tell you something about music just really quickly.
sure.
You tell me you were a musician, or you are a musician. And I think that's amazing because when I was there, I was watching the angels open their mouths, and the words and the music were coming out at the same time, kind of like the whale song. And I talk about that in this book. And I asked them about it, and they said to me, music is the healing mechanism for our spirits. And that's why it has such a profound effect on us, because it came from the angelic realm. And it is
Wow.
powerful. Music will take you anywhere you want to go. You want to be sad, turn on music. You want to be happy, turn on music. You want to re-experience an experience you had in your life, you turn on music. And so it is so powerful.
Hmm.
And it's because they created it to be that.
Well, I've always felt like it is a gift.
It is.
And my entire life, I started writing around age 11. And I remember I was writing and my mother would say, where's that coming from? It almost because, my mom, she was just busy, just making ends meet. And here I am playing music and really speaking my truth and saying things that were very mature for an 11-year-old. And I think it kind of worried her that people would hear my songs and think they're going to think something's like deeply wrong in your life. And so I can understand that where she was coming from with that. And she would tell me, make sure, do cover songs. People want to hear cover songs too. And then as time has gone on in my career and releasing, she's become one of my biggest fans and loves the music I write and all these things. But I know at a young age I was doing
Drawn
something
to it.
and I play the chords and I just start singing and the words just form. And I remember doing that and thinking that was what everyone did in songwriting. And then as I got older, I realized, no, not everyone writes that way. Some do, but many don't. And then I'm trying to understand, well, why do I write that way? And then as I coach people, I see the different styles and I know the healing power in music. I see it with my students. I see it with people. So I appreciate you sharing that. That's amazing. It doesn't surprise me. It's the one area that I can really
Relate to.
definitely relate to and feel like immediately when you say it. So,
Mhm.
but thank you so much. This has been amazing. One last question I always ask all my guests, if it's okay, is to just give me whatever comes to your heart. Now I'm really excited to ask you this question, just because I just want to see how you're going to deliver it. When it comes to you, and if I ask this question as to what is the main reason that we all incarnate on the earth?
The ultimate soul path, self-love.
Okay.
When we can live on this planet and develop the full potential of self-love on this planet, our soul has expanded beyond measure because it is almost impossible.
Mm,
It is the hardest thing we do. And our soul, because of that hardship, goes expansion, 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 expansion. So when we have self-love, we love everything and everyone. When we have true self-love, everyone is at a different level of that. I think, having said that, people tell me, I've had such a hard life. I knew I'm just a new soul that has to learn a lot right now. And I tell them, you have a hard life because you're an old soul and your soul could handle it. A new soul doesn't have a hard life. They
right.
have little things because they wouldn't survive it. So
Right.
if you're going through a hardship and you've got the PhD in hardship like I did, that I chose,
Hmm.
just know your soul's been here a lot because
Right.
you can handle it.
Right.
And you knew that before you came here, that you could handle it. And you
Hmm.
can and you will.
I love that. I love that. And for anyone out here that feels that you're an old soul, don't worry. I think there are times where it calms down.
Oh,
Like people go
yeah.
through a lot and then there's a part where it's okay, it's time to push our knowledge to people. And because I know what you mean exactly by that. And you're right. Likely more the newer soul is the person who has little things. They think it's big things, but they're the smaller things. And
Yeah.
yeah, I would see it more like that too, I think. But that's
And we're
interesting that
in the
people
ebb
come
and
to,
flow.
right,
It's like the ocean, ebb and flow.
right. Absolutely. This has been amazing. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. This has been
Thank you for inviting me.
beyond what I imagined. I always feel that way with most of the guests I talk to. I start with this feeling of where it's going, and then it's just in this whole other realm, and I feel so uplifted at the end. And that's what I hope for the people listening in. I do usually turn to the camera and say, please continue to like, share, and subscribe. This is why I started Soul Inspired. This is why we are part of Soul Inspired. is to inspire and uplift other people, and it helps me get people like Susan on. And I just really do appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Thank you.
So is ya. So